Welcome to the Financial Coaches Podcast, where we talk about how to build your practice from startup to scale up while being the kind of coach your clients crave. Finally, a podcast for financial coaches. Here are your hosts, Maria Casillas and Cody Sizemore.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Financial Coaches Podcast. I'm Maria Casillas, joined here by my incredible co-host, Cody Sizemore, as well as a very special guest. Before I introduce our guest, though, I just wanted to remind you that we love you. We love our listeners. We appreciate you. We're so grateful that you tune in every single week. We've been seeing your questions come through on our Facebook group, and we're just thrilled that we are bringing content to you that is actually changing your business. So I would like to introduce each one of our listeners today to our incredible guest, Angie Carlson. Angie has been a financial coach for about 4 years now. And prior to that, she was in the student loan industry. And so today we're actually going to have the opportunity to glean from her some of her expertise that she got from that. And she's going to share with us, with all of these changes that have been going on lately, how we can coach our clients better. And so, Angie, without further ado, I'd like you to just say hello to our audience and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yes, Cody and Maria, thank you so much for having me. I'm Angie Carlson. Typically, I'm a financial coach for couples, showing them how to break free from all the money rules so that they can enjoy their wealth without the guilt. And so when the announcement was made about student loan default activities resuming, that definitely falls under the without the guilt part of my mission. I knew it was time to pivot and really start focusing on the resources and support, not only that the borrowers need, but also the coaches need, as all these millions of people go into a repayment system that they didn't even have a 2-week heads up for.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, there's so many different changes that are happening with student loans. I mean, I'm sure you're getting flooded with questions, but I'm getting flooded with questions from my own clients. So this is a very timely episode, and I think it's going to be a really valuable one too. Tell us a little bit about like where you came from as far as the student loan side of things, just so we have a better understanding of that and also your expertise around it as well.
Of course. So I worked in a financial aid office for a decade for a small company of cosmetology schools. And so I was the financial aid director over their 5 locations. And so with us being a small office, as a director, I was overseeing every single part of the financial aid system for those schools. And so I know how the data gets reported. I sat with borrowers as they were working through their loans, making decisions, navigating the systems, doing follow-ups after they've graduated. So I have a decade of navigating this complex system, and it is very, very complex. I'll leave it at that and let you two decide what questions you'd like to ask me to go deeper on that topic.
Yeah. Well, I guess my first question is a pretty broad question, but I think that's just important just to kind of see what your take is with everything that's been happening over the last couple of weeks and or months around the student loans, what is your take on what that means for borrowers and what they should really be prepared for or to keep in mind? If you had to kind of speak on it broadly and just say, hey, like 1 or 2 things, whatever it might be.
Yeah, so with how this is impacting borrowers, they're having a lot of feelings, everything from frustration to shame to guilt. And there may be people in their life who are having different feelings, like it's about time. All of those feelings right now are valid, and they don't always agree with each other. And so that's really impacting their relationships, their jobs, their sleep. And so just knowing that the system is also complex and that there's a lot of things that are going on that's not their fault is something I'm really letting my audience know through my social media channels. And then, I'm sorry, will you repeat the question for the second part? I was like, so on that tangent, I lost it.
Yeah. I guess just like your take on everything. I mean, I know that the deferment has paused and it's restarting. I know that there's some people who are wondering like, hey, what does that mean for me if I can't pay them? What does that mean for me if the payment's too high? There's some people who are doing the income-based redriven payment thing. Are there changes with that? Like just kind of like a general kind of stance on it, I guess.
Yeah, so the repayment programs have definitely changed. There was a lot of legislation, especially during the Biden administration, on the SAVE program, and then SAVE isn't really a thing anymore. And now the income-based repayments are less. And even for some people, those payments aren't as affordable. Now, they do have options of deferment or forbearance, but when you're in default, you lose all those options.
Mhm.
And so there are a couple main ways that you can resolve your default, but the caveat to that is you only get those one time. And so really being able to navigate the conversations as a coach and with their servicers for your clients is going to be really, really important.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a client right now who is kind of curious. He actually asked me this question probably like a little bit under a week ago. And he had some concerns around, the new developments with the student loans and everything like that. And he's been paying his student loans this entire time. He's been doing the income driven you know what I'm trying to say, the income thing, right? He's been doing that. And I think it's been like $140 a month for him or something like that. But his income over the last year or so has increased. Not dramatically, but I would say it's probably increased by about 35% as to where it was last year. So, with the new developments of everything that's coming with, hey, if you haven't been paying your loans, you're in default, then we're going to start garnishing your wages and all that kinds of stuff. He was just concerned around his payment for his income redriven based thing going up. He was like, I just don't want it to go up to like $1,000 a month. And should I be worried about this? If it does increase, how much should I be, concerned about? I know that there's a lot of people out there, and I know that there's also a lot of clients who have, or I'm sorry, a lot of coaches who have clients who probably have the same concerns. So someone like that, I mean, like, what would you say to them?
Yeah, well, first, it makes sense that they're concerned because they're trying to get a hold of their money. They're doing all the right things. They're paying down their debts. And now they're just like, these income changes just feel like one more hurdle when they've gotten started. And so, with that income increase, especially at 35%, yes, that income based repayment is going to go up when they recertify in 12 months. And they look at it based on portion of discretionary income. There's calculations that they do. There's calculators out there that can simulate it. Um, there might be something on their servicer's website to go to kind of get a sense of what that would be. And if there is, I would totally encourage them to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And are these going to change by the time they're up to recertify? I mean, 2 weeks ago, we didn't even know we'd be having this conversation. My crystal ball does not work any better than the rest of yours. So a lot of this stuff is we're just going to have to keep an eye on the media and wait and see.
Got it. Yeah. So it's good to know that there's actually like tools out there, whether it be through the servicer or you find a good one online to do like a quick calculation estimation of what those may look like. And I think that that's huge because it gives people at least some form of answer and some peace of mind in some way, rather than, someone like my client who's like, well, I'm paying 140 now. Is it going to go up to 1,000? Like, stuff like that, so it's good to know. And I appreciate you telling me that.
Yeah. And since you're speaking on tools, there's one that we always joked was like the Student Aid Bible. And that is a resource that I know I'm using to keep up to date on the information. And I have told other coaches who have come into my DMs with questions over the last 2 weeks. And that website is called studentaid.gov. studentaid.gov. And so that is where there's resources for borrowers, there's frequently asked questions. And if I was a coach guiding a client, this is where I would start with every client just to get the facts of what's going on. If they don't know if their loans are in default, they can find out on this website. They don't know who their loan servicer is because they've changed during COVID. They're on this website. So it's a really good resource for coaches.
It's great to know. Great to know. Maria?
I would love to go back if I may. I love that you said that we can have people go to studentaid.gov as a place to start. What I'm curious about is you mentioned that your crystal ball isn't as any better than anybody else's. We don't know from time to time what this is going to look like. And just from a coach's standpoint, I know sometimes 85 to 95% of the stuff we worry about never comes to fruition, and it just turns into fruitless worry.
Mhm.
How do we as coaches navigate a balance between making sure that our clients are informed
Mhm.
and not having them freak the hell out because of something that's actually not even going to affect them? Do you see where I'm going with that?
Yes, I do. And that question makes sense. And so this is why if someone reaches out to you and they want to have a consultation and they're just like, I don't even know if I'm default. Well, that's something you've got to help, that's something we got to figure out, because if they're in default, for me, that totally changes what direction I go. And thankfully, with my knowledge, I can do that on the fly on a consult, but I'm guessing the average coach cannot.
Mm-hmm.
And so deciding how much information that you want in advance, because also what I've noticed with coaches as I've done some events for borrowers and coaches over this last week is the more they dig down the rabbit hole, the more confused they're getting, the more they want specific information because they don't want to get it quote unquote wrong. And the system is so complex that if you're not in it and necessarily know what you're looking for as a coach, that is going to be very, very hard for you to do. There's
Okay.
also going to be another side of this of if they are in default and they come in and say, the government started garnishing my wages and my paycheck is less. Well, now you've got a practical budgeting thing going on in addition to your client wanting to get back 15% of their paycheck.
Okay. So as coaches, oftentimes, for lack of a better analogy, we talk about, teaching them how to fish rather than giving them a fish. And for us, it would
Mhm.
be much easier for us to learn how to, as coaches, to learn how to teach our clients how to navigate the system rather than us trying to dig into that and try to find the answers for multiple clients. Does that make sense as well?
Yes, it
Okay.
does, because yes, and this makes sense. And this is why it's going to be very hard for the coaches to dig, is because a lot of the student loan system is set up to follow the borrower decision. And so
Mm.
when coaches are like, do you have a step-by-step process for this? I start with studentaid.gov, and beyond that, that information will drive whatever process I send them down. And it can be many. And in my experience with the school I worked at, the experiences are so, so different. So as a coach, to try to go in and like prepare for every scenario, one, you're not going to see every scenario. I have 10 years in the field. I have not seen every scenario yet. And
Mm-hmm.
this was me doing this job 40 hours a week. So it's just not a efficient use of the coach's time, in my opinion.
Exactly. I agree with that. So I'm slightly familiar with studentaid.gov, but more as a parent than as
Mhm.
anything else, because I actually have a college student and then one entering college. So I had to go through and set up the whole thing for the FAFSA and all that junk. And
Mhm.
so I'm sharing that only because when I did that, all of my stuff from when I went to school came up. And that was 20 some years ago. And there it
Mhm.
was on the thing about, the loans that I had, et cetera. But I would not have known how to, like, what information was needed. I didn't know that
Mhm.
that even existed anymore, because it had been 20 some years.
Mhm.
And so maybe we could just tell the coaches, what information will the clients need when they go to studentaid.gov? I'm assuming if they have student loans, they already have one of those accounts, if you will. But
Depends.
okay, so this is the kind of information that we're looking for.
Yeah. So studentaid.gov only has federal student loan information,
Okay.
i.e., subsidized loans, unsubsidized loans, parent plus loans on the parent account only, and Perkins loans. It doesn't have your loan from a private servicer because you're paying that back to a private entity, not the federal government.
Okay.
And
That's
so this
good.
conversation we're having is not to private student loans, and those loans would be continuing on repayment even during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So you've
Okay.
got to know like what loan type you have to know what path to navigate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So part of it for coaches is going to be to info gather. We're going to be
Mm-hmm.
gathering info from our clients to figure out, like, and it might just be because they don't even know. So many students sign up for loans that they have no clue what they're signing up for, right? And I know that's where some of that shame and guilt comes from. That's not what
Mm-hmm.
this is about. This is about the way that it was thrust upon them and they were told sign on this dotted line and they did it
Mm-hmm.
and all sorts of that stuff. All that aside, we need to figure out what lines did you sign on, right? So maybe it's some people don't always save their paper anymore, if there isn't even paper anymore. I'm obviously dating
Right.
myself here. So how do they find out what they had done in the past? How do we help them to gather that information?
Right. And that's all going to depend on what the student has saved. Is their promissory note signed and uploaded somewhere online? Because the government has to have that to take out the student loan. And so it's really going to be just the student really remembering what they went to school for. It's also going to be them remembering some of the decisions that they've made, because how default is calculated is based on the number of days. And I would not expect an average coach to see this, but in my experience, I've seen those calculations being incorrect. But that's all the conversation process with the servicer, which I believe we're going to be touching on here. So I'll hold that thought till then. But it's just, I mean, this is a labyrinth. This is complex. And as a coach, like, it also can be very frustrating for a coach. So if you're experiencing frustration going through this with your client, that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
I get frustrated working with my clients on this, and I have a lot more expertise than the average coach.
Okay.
I think that's important to point out because, there's a lot of coaches, especially in this space, that kind of struggle with imposter syndrome in
Mhm.
certain ways. So, when they're met with this student loan, we'll just call it crisis, right? That's
Right.
affecting millions of people all at once, and probably a good majority of their clients as well. But they're not an expert in this field specifically, and with it being so complex, I think that it's really important to hear from someone who has expertise in this area. That even for you, it's frustrating, So I really appreciate you saying that, because I do think that that's important for the listeners to hear. Is that like, hey, you probably aren't going to know all the answers, and that's okay. Don't expect to. Just do your best, lead your clients in the best way that possible, and of course, continue to do your research and digging of information to try and fine tune your skills in this area even more. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also for coaches, I have a lot of content that's public on my social media pages that you can feel free to share to yours. Don't copy and paste it as your own, but you can take my post
Right.
and definitely share it to your audience.
Mhm. It's awesome.
That's very generous. Thank you for
Yeah, I
offering
have
that.
also done a recording for borrowers that had signed up for me on like specific steps borrowers can take. And a lot of coaches have asked me if they can share that recording with their clients. And that answer is also yes, because I did that to get the information out that the media is not telling people.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, we'll have you share where we can find that at the end of today's episode. You mentioned that we're going to be able to go into a little bit more depth about how to manage the call with a servicer. And I think that Cody's his transition there is a really good spot to transition into that if we could. So tell us what you mean by that. What call with a servicer are you even talking about? Our coaches are new to all of this.
Yeah, so when student loans are in default, if there's paperwork questions or something's, they submit the paperwork and now the servicer saying they didn't get it, this might take a phone call or some type of help service to resolve. And when you call a loan servicer, especially right now, this process is going to be very frustrating. There are millions of borrowers who don't want their paychecks garnished. So guess what everyone is doing right now? Slamming the phones. And so your hold time is going to be lengthy. Right now, the average hold time is like 58 minutes. My unsolicited, no data opinion is that it's going to go up exponentially, adding to frustration for clients and coaches. And when they do pick up the phone and get somebody at the end of the servicer, people are normally very hot and pissed off after being on hold for hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing that I am coaching my clients to do and coaching borrowers to do is when the person picks up the phone, be very calm, be very kind, be very direct. Thank them for doing what they're doing, because you want them to stay on the line with you until your issue is resolved. And honestly, no one wants to pick up the phone and be told to F off.
Mm-hmm.
So if your borrowers can go in with with their questions known, what they're looking for, kind, respectful, even if they've been on hold for 4 or 5 hours, that is going to go such a long way on them getting what they need.
Mm-hmm. So you're encouraging us to help our clients manage expectations. and then
Correct.
be civil when they're there. So if
Right.
you know you're going to be on hold for an hour to 5 hours, don't pick up the phone and call when you can't do something else while you're waiting.
Mhm.
Like make sure you're using that time on purpose. Just you put it on speaker, let it be on
Mhm.
hold. Don't literally just sit at your desk and wait for 5 hours, because that will obviously make that more
Right.
frustrating for you.
Yeah, I would not offer to do these calls with my client either. Just, I mean, I know people are like, oh, let's serve them. I want to listen to the service call. I want to hear what they have to say. As a coach, yes, I know that's super serving. I don't see that as being the best use of your time.
Well, and it's not really teaching them to fish.
Yeah.
Correct.
I was gonna
Like
say the same
we
thing.
want to encourage them and empower them to do these things on their own,
Mhm.
because I mean, hopefully they'd be able to get it done in one call, but I'm assuming you're going to share with me that that's not the case. And so we can't just be there and do it for them all the time. So I think that managing their expectations and coaching them through that process is a way better approach than doing it for them.
Yeah. I mean, the average is about 5 to 7 phone calls. And according to Department of Ed's own data, there have been millions of mistakes made by servicers. And so sometimes your client may get information that may not be 100% accurate. I had a client that hired me that had that exact situation happen.
Mm-hmm. And this
Mm.
goes across all industries. I mean, I know for myself, when just dealing with health insurance, I made a phone call on one claim, probably 5 or 7 phone calls, and all 5 to 7 people said something different. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So I'm
Mhm.
sure that with all of these changes, this is something that many servicers maybe are saying one thing that was true 45 minutes ago. That's a little bit of a hyperbole, but it's
Mhm.
not true anymore. And so as it changes so fast, it's got to be very difficult for them to keep up with it.
Well,
So
and
with
if you think about what happened during COVID, people weren't paying on their student loans. So what did loan servicers not need? Call center representatives.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that they're staffing up, a lot of these call center representatives are new to the Department of Education. And the Department of Education did a FAFSA quote unquote simplification rolled out, and they were fully staffed. They're not fully staffed anymore.
Mm-hmm.
so with all this happening and all of these mistakes or different information from different people,
Mhm.
I mean, how do we equip our clients to know what's true and what's false?
What I tell my clients is you want to keep a log of everyone you talk to. You want to document when you called, you want to document who you talked to, at what time, and keep everything in the same time zone too. I know that sounds insane, but do it. And just really write down what was discussed. And so that way, as you go and try to ask more questions or work with your coach on what questions to ask before your clients call, you at least have some data to go off of. And for me, that's why I'm adding things to my coaching practice to help clients have these conversations, especially if their loan situations are just like, this is so complex, I don't even know where to go. That's why I'm positioning myself to be that coach resource as well.
Hmm, okay. So basically just keep very detailed records of everyone
Yeah.
and everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely. And, with your servicer has a website, definitely get that account set up if you don't have it already, because what borrowers are seeing, especially the ones on income-based payment, is sometimes their payments aren't even covering the interest on the loan.
Hmm,
So you're going to be experiencing frustration from borrowers who are like, well, I'm paying on my loans. Why does my balance keep going up?
right. Right.
And student loans are actually required to be paid off in a certain way, which makes it very hard to get to the principal at times.
Right. In what way?
Yes, so there's a three-way process. So student loans always pay off any fees first. That's late fees or collection fees. Those have to be paid in full before any money goes to the interest on the student loan. Only when all that interest is paid in full does money touch the principal. And no, you cannot indicate a principal-only repayment to get around this.
Got it.
And that's what makes the student loan so challenging to get out from under.
Okay. So I'm playing devil's advocate here. And first of all, thanks for saying that, because I don't think that a lot of people know that that's how it actually works. It's fees,
Mhm.
then interest, then principal, right?
Mhm.
In that order too. So I do appreciate you clearing that up. Let's just paint a picture here though.
Okay.
Let's say that someone talks to their servicer they get some information, they get some conflicting information, and then they get some more conflicting information. And they make the move to move forward in a certain way that they think is correct and the best way. But then months down the road, they find out, hey, that's actually wrong, and we need this now. And maybe it's a considerable difference for them. For
Yep.
someone who might be in that kind of position, what does that mean for them? And how do they like navigate through that? Because to me, like if I was a borrower and I was
Mhm.
told like, hey, like, you have to pay $200 a month, right? And
Mhm.
you're like, are you sure? And they're like, yep, we're sure. And you're like, you're
Yep.
positive. And they're like, yep. And then you're like, okay, cool. That works for me.
Mhm.
And I start paying that $200 a month for the next 8 months. And because of that, I think my budget is a certain way. And I start
Mhm.
making other financial decisions based off of that $200 a month payment. But then 8 months later, they're like, oh, no, it's not 200. It's actually 557. And
Yep.
that might affect someone's financial position, their financial plans. Like,
Mhm.
where do we go from here? I'm not saying
Yeah.
you have the answers, but at least
Right.
just some sort of like insight, I guess, would be
I would
appreciated.
say one, be prepared for that. That is more of a reality than you all even think.
Hmm.
And it's very rarely the number going down. I have seen that happen with the number going down too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because people don't know what they don't know. As a coach, you don't know what you don't know. Your clients don't know what you don't know. And so it's really hard to separate the decisions you're making from the outcomes, especially in the student loan world, when you made a decision to go to school that maybe didn't turn out as planned. You were told you could take these loans and get a good job. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
You planned out life and maybe you had triplets instead of one baby for your first. And so you've made these plans that haven't gone to plans, and now you're even frustrated because you're trying to make a plan again that's not going to plan. And as coaches, when we do our consultations, that makes it harder, in my opinion, for a client that is considering investing with a coach to make that investment, because what if this is the next thing that may not work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even just putting myself in borrower's shoes, I know my personality. And I
Mhm.
know that if that happened to me, then I would be like, well, this isn't my fault. You're
Mhm.
the ones who made the mistake. You're the ones who told me the wrong information. So you should then meet me where I'm at, kind of thing. But I have a feeling that's not how it's gonna go.
I would agree with that feeling.
Uh-huh.
And if you want me to, I can share what happened with one of my clients that went through a scenario just like that to show your
Absolutely.
listeners how
Please.
that happened. So I had a client who hired me specifically because they wanted a coach that knew the student loan system. And they were told by their servicer, like, yep, we have a federal student loan. Yep, it's an income-based repayment. Yep, it's going to be forgiven after 25 years. They're in like year 27 or 28 of this loan. And they're like, this thing is not getting forgiven. Everyone's saying that we meet the criteria, but we don't. And so when they sent me their loan information to look at, in 60 seconds, I saw what the problem was. Because back in the day, there used to be a federal, an FELLP, don't quote me on the name right now, I should have written that down. But it was an old loan type that no longer exists because the Department of Ed went to direct loans in 2010. Because their loan wasn't a direct federal student loan, it actually wasn't eligible. And while they were working with me, there was a program that was open temporarily to fix that problem. And so I was like, you do need to get in here. You need to do XYZ, get this done. And they ended up a year later getting that loan forgiven. But if they were like, if we didn't have Angie to walk us through that, they're like, there's no way we would have ever figured this out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to be like one of the things I'm really keeping my eye on is, okay, what news is coming down? How's it impacting people? Because yes, as coaches, we can budget to help people with a wage garnishment and live on 15% less. But the client's concern is going to be, they want their 15% of their income back. They're not going to care how great the budget is. They want to focus on getting that income back.
Right. Yeah. I think it's awesome that you're able to serve them in that way. I'm sure that they
Thank you.
were very grateful for you in that
The,
moment.
the morning they got their loans forgiven, they lived on the West Coast. I'm on Central Time. My phone rings at like some ungodly early hour in the morning. And I saw it was their number. I normally don't take clients' calls that early, but I'm like, why are they calling me? Like, I'm not even out of bed yet. So I just pick up the phone, very groggy, and they're like, Angie, oh my God, oh my God. And I'm like, did somebody die? Like, I mean, they're like, it happened, it happened, it happened, it happened. Oh I'm like, what happened? They're like, our student loan, our mistress, she's gone. We've had her our whole marriage.
Our
She's been with
mistress,
us in our bed the whole time, and she's not here anymore.
yeah,
So,
yeah. And I'm sure that was the best way to wake up that morning too, so.
it took me a little bit to get with the programs. I wasn't fully awake, but yeah, it was one of the best wake up calls I've ever had.
Yeah. Love it. Well, I know that you mentioned it right before we started recording that you only had so much time, so I want to be mindful of that. And I want to kind of wrap it up with just a few things. I mean, one, which I probably save for the end, is just where can people connect with you? How you might be able to serve them or support them in certain ways. So we'll get to that. But I want to kind of talk to the coaches listening directly who have those clients that they know that they have student loans, and there's been whispers between them and their clients of what is happening and how do we move forward from here, right? Speaking directly to those coaches, what is the one thing that you're like, hey, I just need to say this to you?
Yes, I need to say, validate what your client is feeling. And as a coach, you may not agree with what your client is feeling, but do not invalidate their experience. Do not put them down. And for the love of God, do not judge them for it.
That's huge. It's huge because especially with student loans. So I'm a millennial. And growing up, we were told over and over and over, go to college, 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 and everything will work out great. So then you're an 18-year-old and you sign the dotted line for sometimes the equivalent of a mortgage. And you have no idea what you're doing. You have no idea what you're doing in that moment. You have no idea what you're doing with your life in general. And if there's, people out there like me, which I know for a fact that there are, I went to college for 2 years and dropped out. And you want to know why I went to college? It's not because I wanted to. It's because my parents basically, they didn't force me, but they made it very clear, like, you should go to college. So, and all my friends were going to college and all this kinds of stuff. And I was like, this is just what we're doing. Okay, cool. And I went into college with no idea what I wanted to do. I just went into business because that was the most generic thing I could think of. Ended up hating it, dropped out, had to pay back those student loans for literally nothing. And now, I have kids where I'm like, hey, if you want to go to college, great. But I'm not going to force you. And I'm not going to encourage it either. But if it's something that you want to do because it's something that actually makes sense to go to college for, like a nurse or a lawyer or something like that, then great, go to college. So there's a lot of people who have that guilt and that shame because maybe they went to college not because they wanted to in the first place, but because they felt like they needed to. And there may even be other people who feel that guilt and shame because they went to college because they wanted to, but they got a degree in something that hasn't been paying a good return on investment. They spent $150,000 on their loans or on their college education. Let me take that a level deeper. But they have a job that's paying them $40,000 a year. So there's a lot of people who are dealing with that guilt and with that shame and that embarrassment. So I really like.
And they got the advice from someone they trusted, mom and dad. What is that doing to their relationship with their parents?
Right.
And so if they can't trust their mom and dad, who can they trust? If they can't trust the professors or the people who said they were going to be there for them, who can they trust? There are a lot of those issues going on with this process as well, which is why, for me personally, I am doing a lot of things on social media, doing some events for free, because there is a huge trust factor as a coach that we have to overcome. And when you have decades of trusting advice and it doesn't work out, that just doesn't switch on a dime because you show up as a coach.
Yeah. And I completely agree. I think that there's definitely that hurdle to jump of getting your clients to trust you and also to trust, just the process of investing into our services. But I also think that just kind of building off of what you said, probably one of the most important things that we can do with our clients, whether they have student loans and they're going through this situation or with credit cards or anything else that they have
Mm-hmm.
that guilt and shame around or regret around, is actually helping the clients learn how to trust themselves as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's super important. A lot of coaches overlook that side of coaching because they're so deep into the numbers, but everything that you're saying is just reinforcing that whole ideology. So again, you said a lot of really good things, but
Mm-hmm.
I really, really like what you just said there.
Thank you.
I'd like to put a cap on that, if I may, because as a parent, I hear, they thought they could trust their parents and then they ended up not being able to trust them. And this might sound a little defensive, maybe it is, but it's that idea that the parents, some of them maybe didn't know better. I mean, some of them maybe did know better and just did it, but so many of them didn't know any different. And so the reason I'm putting a cap on it there is because we really need to be able to teach our clients to trust themselves, like you said, Cody. And those years of anywhere from 17 to 24, like those are such formidable years for us that we don't even, we probably don't trust ourselves because we're still trying to figure out who the heck we are and just all of that stuff. It's very complicated. But I also think if there is harbored resentment and feeling like I'm a victim of circumstance, or I'm a victim because my parents didn't know any better or whatever, I think that forgiveness is also important. And I don't mean loan forgiveness. I mean, just relational forgiveness. I think that's going to be something that our clients are going to need to know. Like, people did the best they could with what they had. Some did. And if that's the case, then we have to make sure that we're looking at that levels of guilt and shame as well. That it's almost like, I don't know if generational is the right word, but it goes up beyond just the client that we're working with. And so if they can heal some of that, they're more likely then to be able to trust themselves and recognize that we all just make the decisions we can with the amount of information that we have. And that if we want to do better, we sometimes just need to know more.
Yeah, there's a phrase in the financial aid world that's called reasonable does not mean agree. And this conversation we just had is a perfect example of that. Because everyone did things that were reasonable, but they definitely don't agree with each other.
Like that.
Well, Angie, we do appreciate you coming on the show and, sharing your time with us. I know that I got a lot of value from it. I'm sure the listeners did as well. And as a byproduct of that, I'm sure that their clients will as well. So we just want to say thank you. And before I let you go, obviously you talked about a couple resources that you had, like on social media, that you encourage people to check out. So I'd love to kind of, allow you to kind of tell the listeners where to find that and also how to get connected with you as well.
Sure. The best place to get connected with me is on social media, on Facebook or Instagram, and the handle is @FinanceCoachAC. If there's also in my picture video here, that link. And I post nearly daily on topics related to student loans. I coach couples, so there's a lot of money communication content, couples content, goes very deep. There's also, I have a program I'm launching right now for this service with defaulted student loans. I recorded an event Monday the 28th about steps borrowers can take, how I walk them through it. That's an hour long that coaches are coming to me asking for the recording. Absolutely, you can have it. Just DM me on the social media site. Say you listen to this podcast. You want that recording link for a client. Happy to share it with you to get that information to the clients, because finding good, reliable information right now is going to be a challenge. And so I want to do my part to be that good, reliable resource for other financial coaches.
Awesome. Lovely. Well, again, we appreciate it. We encourage everyone who's listening to reach out or at least connect with Angie, give her a follow, whatever you need to do. I'm sure that she would be someone that you can keep an eye on. With all these new developments, it seems like there's a new headline every week with this kinds of things. So Angie is probably a really good person to give a follow and even, shoot a message to and just connect with. So definitely do that. But again, Angie, we just appreciate your time. We love this episode and we're looking forward to potentially having you again sometime in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Alrighty, guys. Well, thanks for checking out this episode of the Financial Coaches Podcast. We will catch you next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Coaches Podcast, brought to you by New Money Habits and Sizemore Financial Coaching. Submit your questions to our hosts by emailing podcast@newmoneyhabits.com. Be sure to subscribe to be notified of future episodes and join our growing group of like-minded coaches on Facebook. And until next time, happy coaching.